All right, it's 10:59. What do you guys think? Start or wait? It's their own fault, right? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So this session is Debugging Bootcamp, Detective Bootcamp, Debugging Best Practices. My name is Maka Encarnação, and let's get started. So first of all, who am I? I am a Bruin. I graduated from UCLA with a specialization in computing. And shortly after graduating, I joined Soliant Consulting. I didn't even know what FileMaker was when I joined Soliant. They really taught me everything from the ground up. Got certified along the way. And I guess I can now say I am a co-owner since we started. We are now in the process of being employee-owned, so that's very exciting. Yeah. I'm also the committee lead for the mentoring committee at Women Innovating Together. So check that out. If you're looking for some mentorship, thank you. Wow, you guys are the best. I'm also co-founder of the humanitarian committee at Soliant Consulting, and it's basically where we do our pro bono work for nonprofits. And on a similar note, I'm co-founder of Join Table, which I'll speak more about that in my session tomorrow, but that's basically a way to try to get the community involved in doing pro bono work by basically being a matchmaking site. So if you're interested in doing pro bono, you can sign up. If you're a nonprofit and you need help, you can sign up, and we'll try to match you up with a good match. And I'm also involved with Coders Without Borders, so that's also kind of a similar theme here, and that's for tech first responders. All right, so now a little fun fact about me, all that boring stuff out of the way. This is my dog, Timmy. I'm mildly obsessed with him. And I did a mom's night out with some of my friends, and we did a wine and paint class. And so this was my final product of my Timmy. And I don't paint, I don't do any of that stuff. I've never had any classes or anything like that, so I was really happy with how it came out. And so I told the instructor, so I submitted a picture, and I get to the class, and they already had this sketched out. And I was like, this is an amazing sketch. How did you do this? And she told me, oh, I just used a projector. And my jaw dropped. I'm like, that's a thing? You can just use a projector and trace it on, and basically you're like coloring in between the lines? I was like, that's amazing. So I convinced my husband to buy a projector on Amazon, and I wanted to paint my girls. So these are my girls. And my youngest turns 2 next week. My oldest starts kindergarten next week, so I'm really glad DevCon is this week and not next week. And I wanted to paint them, so this is the final product of my girls that I did with the projector. So thank you. I just want to throw that out there because I have no painting experience, and if that's something you're interested in, I didn't know about it until this year, so. Anyways, enough of that sissy painting stuff. Now it's time to go to boot camp. Game on, right? We are now all in boot camp. So debugging is like being a detective in a crime movie where you're also the murderer, right? So I think we could all agree with this, right? And we have to find all the crimes in our files. And that's really what this session is about. All right, so what's our agenda for today? We're setting up traps. We want to catch those crimes before they happen, right? We want to know our tools. What tools do we have to catch all the crimes that we find? What are some really common crimes in our files, and how do we prevent them from happening? And when you've exhausted your arsenal, what can you do? All right, so we're going to start with setting up traps. You want to always assume that someone that you don't know is reading your script, right? Someone coming almost brand new to your file. So you want to make things as clear and as obvious as possible. So how do we do that? Comment, comment, comment. I don't want to read this block of code. I want you to just tell me. I'm too lazy. I don't want to read it, right? So just tell me what it does. I don't want to try to figure it out. Let's make it clear what's going on. We want to try to use a consistent structure and technique. For example, use headers in all of your scripts. I highly recommend that. In my opinion, these are the 3 minimum things that you should say in all your scripts, but there's a lot of other developers that have a much bigger list, and I say just find what works for you, what you like, and just do it through all your scripts. Be consistent with it. Declare variables up top. So I like to have a block of variables at the beginning, right? So there's a couple of reasons why for this. One, now I know all the variables that are used in my script. They're all right there and they're easy to reference, almost like an index, right? And two, now it's super easy for me to copy and paste those variables because I know how to find them really quickly and I'm not going to misspell them. I'm going to just copy and paste them and not have to worry about typos. So there's many different ways to pass parameters in your file. Just be consistent. I don't want to have to go back and look up how did this script get my parameters, or I don't want to have to guess. I just want to have a consistent method that's basically used throughout my file. All right, prevent typos. Would you guys agree that typos is a pretty common reason that you might have a bug in your file? Copy and paste when you can. I really love this example. This is a script that Bill Heiser wrote. And so he put the actual JSON parameter right there at the header. And so now he just takes that, copies it, and pastes it throughout his scripts, and he'll just replace the little sections that need it. So, you know, it really minimizes the chances of having a typo or forgetting something. I do want to point out, you make sure if you copy, sometimes you accidentally copy a space, so just don't remove that extra space in there. That could cause issues if you do accidentally paste and there's a space in there. Use easy variable names. So you could have very complicated names, but why would we want to do that to ourselves, right? So let's use really easy names. So if you can see in this example, step 7, I'm using just original, and 8, I'm using new. Like it's enough information for me to know what it is, but it's short enough to not be over verbose. So what I'm talking about in this script is organization names. I could have said original organization name, new organization name, but how long is that and how annoying is that? So let's just keep it short, and but still enough information for me to know what I'm talking about. And it's a good idea to have a consistent structure within your variable names. So if you like to camel case, do the camel case. If you like to do the underscore, always do the underscore. Like, try to be consistent so you're not guessing, like, oh, how did I write that variable again? Yeah, so just keep it consistent. And again, declare variables up top is a great way to prevent typos. And then I just wanted to point out, even if they start off as blank, even if you don't declare them until later on, it's good to just have them as a block anyways, right there at the top as an entire section. All right, so how do we predict errors? We want to do some error trapping, right? We want to catch those errors and deal with them before the client calls us up and yells at us, right? So there's some really important script steps, such as go to related records, send mail, that you want to make sure that no error happened afterwards, right? Because if an error happened after those steps, it could really screw up the rest of your script, what you're actually trying to accomplish in that script. And there's two different types of error trapping you can do. You can do a pre-trap or a post-trap. So let's look at this example here. And in this example, I'm doing a post-trap. So I have step 5, where I go to related record, and then I set a variable, which is just my last error, and then I'm checking, was there an error? If it was, exit the script. If not, continue on in the script, right? So that would be a post-trap because step 5, I'm actually doing the action, and then step 6, I'm checking, was there an error after that action? Now a pre-trap would be, I'm not going to do that action unless I can somehow know that it's not going to that an error is not going to occur. So in this example, I'm going to check if there are any related records, but before I try to go to related records. So a way to do that would be, let me just grab that primary key of that related record, and if I get something back, then I know that there are related records there, and it's safe to continue on to the go to related record script set. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So something that happened to me a couple of weeks ago, so I wanted to share with you all, was to watch out for get last error when you have a script trigger attached to a new layout or new window, right? So what happens in this case, I have step 5, I go to related record. If that runs the script trigger, that go to related record, that script will run, right? And then I go to step 6, and that get last error is not going to tell me the error from step 5. It's going to tell me the error from that script trigger. So that could, so your go to related record could have worked fine, but you're still going to potentially get an error from your script trigger. So just keep that in mind. That got me last week or a couple weeks ago. All right, so we want to always check for required values. Are there any empty parameters that are required? Is there any fields that are expected to have data in this script that don't? So let's do a check for that at the very top. Like, what is going to make this script succeed? Let's check for it, and then only let the script continue if all my checks check out. So you really want to ask yourself the whole time, if this script step fails and the script continues to go, what will happen? Is it okay if that happens? Should I let that happen? Or should I really stop that from happening? All right, so setting up traps. Know your suspects. I highly recommend having individual accounts for everybody, even developers. I don't think anybody should really share accounts. I think it's okay to have like a generic developer account that you just use to, any developer can use to go ahead and log into the file and then create their own account. And I'll talk about why in a second. I also highly recommend housekeeping fields, so creation, modification, timestamps, and accounts. Luckily, that's already put it in nowadays, so just don't delete it. Just leave it in there. It is very important. So why do I care about individual accounts, and why do I care about these housekeeping fields? Well, it's really just one more key piece of information. It's more evidence that you're gathering, right? Because if I know who last modified this record that has a problem, I know who last modified it and when, so I can go up to Susie and say, what were you doing at 5 p.m. before you left for the day? Can you walk me through that? Can we see that together? And then maybe I can find out what happened that day, what was the bug in that issue. So you basically want to gather as much evidence as you possibly can, and this is, I think, a very important one. All right, so do your own QA every single time. I don't know how many times I've done like the easiest little change, and I'm like, oh, I'll just send it to the client, I won't test it, because it's so easy, it's so straightforward. But then I stop myself, I'm like about to hit send, and I'm like, oh, I should just test it, it's the right thing to do. And then I test it, and then I find something, and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I found that, I'm glad I tested it. Because you're really saving yourself time and the client time, because the client finds it, then they have to email you back, and then you have to go back and log into the file, you have to be back in that mindset, but you're already there. So even if it's the tiniest little change, just test it. It's always good to test every single thing. All right, sometimes you have to, actually I would argue, every time you have to recreate the crime scene, because it's really hard to fix a bug if you can't recreate the bug, right? So what are some ways we can recreate the crime scene? So I highly recommend setting up a QA or dev copy of your file. There's different ways you can do this. I have some clients who prefer to just have a completely separate server, and it's the dev server, and it's completely separate from production. But I also have clients who would just put up a duplicate of production and just rename it, and then I like to put a big banner at the top of it that says like dev, 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 or something like that, so as soon as you log in, it's really obvious that you're not in production. And that way you can do development in that file, you can do QA in that file, you can do debugging in that file if the bug is in both files. So highly recommend doing that. Sometimes the bug is in a very specific context. It's in a very specific found set. And it's going to be hard to recreate in a dev file, which may not have the most up-to-date records. So one thing you could do is just grab a backup from before that issue happened. Just grab it and play with it on your local file and try to recreate the crime that way, just through that local file. Because then that's a really nice, fresh crime scene that hasn't been murdered yet. If you have to investigate in prod for whatever reason, let's say there's a time crunch or for whatever other reason, I recommend doing a fresh backup of production before you mess with it, and then also duplicate that script before you mess with it, just so you have a backup to reference, or if you need to revert for whatever reason. It's just another little safety check. All right, so leave breadcrumb trails with logs. There's many different ways to set up logs in FileMaker, so we'll go through some of that. I think probably the easiest way, or well, the most common up until 18, potentially, is just having a log table. So you just create a brand new table, and it's probably called log or errors or however you want to call it, and then you can just have a script all it does is create new records and set fields with the parameter that you pass. So for example, log entry and error code. And you could even run that on perform script on server and not have to worry about it. So that's probably one good way. I would highly recommend, though, if you do something like that, to cleanse that table once in a while. Like maybe even do like a nightly schedule where it's checks. Are my log entries over 6 months old? Are they over a year old? Yes, then delete them. Like you don't want that log file to just get big and clog up your file. All right, so you could also, I've seen this happen before, you can also create a log with just a global variable. Like you could have a variable that you just append your log entries to every time. And so the nice thing about that is, it's kind of less work. You don't have to worry about setting up the table and all that. But it is very session specific, so you're not going to be able to see some other user's global variable, and it also dies when your session dies, so that's kind of a pro and con too, because it's like, it only gives you the information at that time. All right, but we have some exciting new 18 features for logging. So I'm going to walk through that too. So there's the FileMaker data file manipulation features that are new to 18. And these are the ones that I think are the bare minimum that you should know for logging. And so I'm going to demo this. I'm going to walk through this really quick, but I do want to point out that there's a lot more. There's a lot more than this, and I won't go through all of them, but I do have a blog post that does go through all of them in detail. And so check that out if you want to learn about the other ones. All right, so I'm going to jump into the demo file here. Let's see here. Not that one, that one. And let me zoom in. Is that good? Cool. All right, so the first one I'm going to talk about is this one, set error logging. So it's a very simple script, and it just looks like this, and you basically have the option to toggle it on or off. And you also have a calculation dialog with it. So you can actually add some custom, whatever you want to record in the logging, you can also add it there. So for example, like get extended privilege count or something like that. Or even like global fields, global values, even variables you could throw in here. So, so that's cool. And so if you run that, I'll show you what that looks like. In default, it goes to your documents folder. And it's called, where is it? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So it looks like this. And so it's going to show you the date, the time, the file name. It's going to show you the count. It's going to show you the script name, and then the script step, and then the error code. And then if you added anything to that calculation, it's going to go off to the right here. So anything else. So it's nice because it's already like most of the work is already done for you. So there's that, and now there's an option in FileMaker 18 now to create new data files. So we're going to walk through that a little bit. So in this demo file, it's in my blog post, and it's also part of the materials here, but I'm just going to set the desktop, use this button to just set the desktop, and then I have the option here to create folders. So let me just, DevCon 2019, so that's going to be a folder, and I'm going to call this log.txt. And so I'm going to hit run, and it's going to say file created successfully. So let's go look at that file. So I put it to the desktop here. Here, it created this folder for me. And here's my file that I just created. You can see it's empty, it's brand new, but it exists, so that's cool. So now we want to write to that file, right? But before we can do that, we got to open it. And so when you open a file in FileMaker 18, you're basically just saying, like, FileMaker is allowed to use this. Like, FileMaker has access to this file. So, actually, sorry, before I do that, no, yes, okay. I didn't show you this, did I? No. So I did want to show you this. So let's create the file. This is what the script step looks like. You just send in the path, and then you have the option of on or off, and I think, yeah, that's it. So yeah, I just wanted to show you what that looked like. It's very simple. So now to open the file, I want to give it the exact same path. So I'm going to use this button to just do that for me. It just grabs the data from there and puts it in here. And then I'm going to hit run. So it's going to tell me file opened successfully, and you'll just see in my demo that it opened it and it set the file ID. So I'm going to talk about the file ID in a second, but let me save that and then open. So what this looks like right here is open data file, and it's got a path. So that's the path that I gave it. And it wants a target for my file ID, and I can give it a variable or I can give it a field name. But what that is, it's basically FileMaker's way of referencing back to that file that's been open. So it's like a temporary ID for a file that's open. And normally it would start at 1, but because I've been playing with it today, it started at 3. But normally you just see 1, and then as you open more, just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until you close FileMaker. And then the next day it would like restart up again. So, so now I have my file ID. My file is open, so now I want to write to it. So I come over here, let's set this to 3, and I can choose if I want UTF-18 or 16, 8 or 16, totally reverse that. What? Oh, thank you. All right, and I can choose which type I want to write it to, and then I have this option here to append line feed. And what that will do is just add a return character after every entry, which is really nice for logging, right? It'll just make a list for you. So we're going to go ahead and run that. So we can see over here that it says, can you guys see that? Entry 1, all is good, really, really good. Okay, and so let's take a look at what that script step looks like. So all it is write to data file, and I have to give it the file ID, and I have to give it the source, which is just the text I'm going to write, and that could also be a variable as well, and with a type, UTF-8 or 16, and then this option here to either append the line feed or not. And one other thing I'll mention about the file ID is that it is used in a lot of these other functions. So like get data file position wants file ID, read from data needs the file ID. So it is something that you'll have to keep track of when you're working with these script steps. All right, so that's all I have for this section. Actually, I can close this file now. And we will move on to the next one. So getting familiar with your tools. There's the script debugger, which I'm going to walk through right now, and the data viewer. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the FM2 Empower Developer Assistant plugin. This one is available for purchase, and I highly recommend it. I think it's a total lifesaver, and I will walk you guys through that one so you can kind of see what that's like too. So let's do another demo here to look at this. So to open the script debugger, I'll just go to Tool, Script Debugger. And I need to actually run anything from here, I just need to run a script. So I could press a button on my layout, or I can go to my script workspace and just highlight one of these and then press the play button, and that will also run that script for me. So let's just try this one out. So you'll see some buttons up here, and so you have this button here is just going to open up the script for me so I can edit the script if I want to. I cannot save the script while the script debugger is open, but I can edit it, and then once I'm done using the script debugger, once the script is no longer in use, I can then save my changes to my script. There is an option here to play, So that will just run through the script really fast. And what you can do is set a little marker. So if you want it to play up until a certain point, which I'll demo a little bit later in the session, then you can use this marker and it'll just play up until it gets to the very first marker. There's also a stop button, which basically just kills all the scripts that are currently running. So this script or any parent scripts you have in there, they would all die. This is a murder mystery. And this one is a step into. So what this button does is it lets you step by step through each step in your script, but it won't go into any subscripts. It'll just stay in the parent script. So that's what that one does. But if you want to go into any subscripts, you should use the next button here, which is basically what I mostly use, is this one. And this will actually go through every script step, including your subscripts. It really goes in as much detail as it can. And this next button here is if you are in a subscript and you want to go back to the parent script, like you're like, all right, I'm done with this, I just want to go back, you can press this and it'll take you out back into the parent script. And this button here is to force you to go into a location. So for example, if I wanted to force to go into there, I can just highlight that row and then press that button and it forces it. And it won't actually run any of the steps that you're skipping. It'll really skip them. So that's kind of nice if you want to test a situation that's really hard to replicate and you just want to kind of force it, you can do it this way. And then there's the buttons here. So this is just to disable or enable script triggers. Like if I want to test with script triggers off, I can uncheck this one. And this will open the data viewer, which I will talk about next. And then I will point out there's a little pause on error button, and if you check that box, the script will, anytime the script runs, whenever there's an error, your script debugger will pop up and will show you where that error was. So let's jump really quick to the data viewer. So the data viewer has current and watch. And so in the current, we'll have anything that's actually running from your script. So anything that's happening through your script. And actually, I probably should have, oops. I wanted to show you guys something about that too. So let me pull this back up. Okay, so you can see my param value just popped up in here because it got set on my script. And so now it's in my current. And one thing that's kind of cool about this is you can actually edit this. So if you want to force your script to be something else or your variable to be something else just temporarily, you can actually edit it in here. And then there you go. So now my script will actually say, so if I run through here, it's going to say, I can't find this layout. I can't find ha ha ha. So I thought that was kind of cool. And you can also save any of these to watch. If you just highlight it and then add to watch, it'll move it over to the watch tab. And the watch tab is essentially your playground for calculations. You can really do anything you want in here in the calculation dialog. And I really recommend testing all of your execute SQLs in here, testing any of your what's the other one, JSON, anything that is you just want to make sure it looks good before you put it in your script, make sure it actually works, the data goes through it correctly, then just do it in here first. And there is this option to automatically evaluate, and I used to have that on all the time, and then we'll talk about this in a little bit, but my app kept crashing, or I kept having to force quit. So now I have the unchecked, and I just manually, but whatever works for you is good. All right. So I did want to talk about the developer assistant really quick too. So what that is this little guy right here. And in my opinion, its superpower is the searching. So if I wanted to just type in here, set field, and hit next, it'll actually scan through all of my scripts and look for where the next set field is through all my scripts. And if I hit next, it'll go to the next one. And so where this is really powerful is you got a dialogue and someone, your client says, oh, I can't I got this dialog, and here's a screenshot of it, and you don't know what script that's from, like you can just search that text from that dialog in there and you'll find the script right away. Or let's say you have an SMTP, you guys use SMTP, and then the password changes, and you hard-coded all those passwords instead of saving it as a global field. Then you have to go through and find every single time there's that SMTP is. So this is awesome because it really just finds it for you really fast. And it also will work for the relationship graph as well. So if you guys have any really messy relationship graphs and it's super hard to find the table occurrence you're looking for, so I could type in here, event, and I know this is not the best example, but hey, I found it, yay. So yeah, and I will point out it does also do find and replace in your scripts. I've never actually tried that because I'm petrified of it, but if you're braver than me, yeah, go for it and try it. All right, so that was your tools. So I'm going to jump to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to talk about some common crimes. All right, so you got this police report. Script does not complete or perform script on server doesn't work. So what could possibly have happened there? Here's a possible crime committed. You use halt script instead of exit script. So why is that wrong? What's wrong with that? So halt script stops all scripts in the script stack, parents and subscripts. And if you're doing something like, if you have halt script in your opener script, let's say, and then you do perform script on server, or you do a data API call, your opener script, if it reaches the halt script, it kills everything and it never actually gets to that script you were trying to call. So I highly recommend always using exit script, never use halt script. And just to kind of visualize that a little bit more, let's say you have these two script stacks, okay? If I use halt script, all my script die. That's it, everything is done. But if I use exit script, they're still there, they can still live, and they can still run. So obviously you have to kind of elegantly account for any issues with why that script might have exited, but it doesn't just die everything off right away. Okay, so the next one here, police report, similarly, perform script on server doesn't work. So there's many possible reasons why that crime might have been committed. So again, we talked about the unopened script, and you could do something like get application version and check if it's server, and that way, if it is server, you just bypass some of the stuff that you might not care about for the unopened script. You have to keep in mind when you use perform script on server that the context and session is completely different. They're really two different sessions. So the perform script on server does not know what layout you're on, does not know your found set. It really has no clue about your context. All it really knows is the information that you passed in the parameters, and that's it. So just don't assume that it knows much. So this one's interesting. Lisette Wilson brought this one up to me. She says that if you have a multi-file solution and you use perform script on server, you actually need to make sure that all your files are open on your client. Yes, it's interesting. And if it doesn't, for some reason, perform script on server doesn't see those other files, like they have problems connecting to it. You want to make sure your script step are always server-side compatible when you use perform script on server. So how do we do that? When you're actually creating scripts, you have this option to choose the compatibility level. So if you check server, then it'll show you, it'll highlight the ones that are not compatible. So you just want to make sure as a check that you're actually using the ones that work with the server. You want to just keep in mind that you are on the server, so you only have access to the documents and temporary folder. So if you're trying to access the desktop, you're not going to be able to. And you also need to commit before you run script step. And here's why. So let's say I go to a layout, I create a new record, I set the field, and then I pass the primary key to perform script on server. well, now I have this session open, and now my perform script on server is trying to access the same record, so I have a record locking issue, right? It's going to fail. My perform script on server is going to fail because I have it locked. But just throw a commit in there, and then you're good to go. All right, so next crime here is system level script on server doesn't work. So I always have problems with system level scripts. I'm always like, it works fine on the server machine when I try it, but then when I try to hook it up to the server as a schedule, then it fails. So many possible issues here. So the biggest one that I've always encountered is file permissions. So you have to keep in mind that any files you use on the system level scripts, they have to have access from FileMaker Server. FileMaker Server has to have the permission to actually use them. So there is actually a way to change that, though. You could actually change it to a different account if you want to. But by default, it has to be FMM Server, and Windows is the default account. Execution context. So I highly recommend always using absolute paths, not relative paths, because just because of the way it works from the root level, so it makes it work better. Make sure your time limit is not too short, so that is a possible reason why it could fail. And keep in mind that file names are case sensitive when you're working with system level scripts. All right, so the next crime I have here is SMTP doesn't work. How many people have had that issue? That's like a pretty common one. So again, many possible reasons for this. Probably the most common one I've seen is IT changed the login, so you have to go update the password, right? Does your SMTP require a VPN? I've seen that where it's like it works with a VPN and it doesn't work without one. And typos, obviously you want to make sure that your settings are correctly. Is there an email recipient? Is the email recipient invalid or empty? That could cause it to fail, the script step to fail. Of course, there's many different configurations with SMTP, so you want to double check all your settings. And then finally, the very sad one, your account has been disabled. So you want to make sure your account is still active that you're using with SMTP. All right, the next one is get script result doesn't return what I expected, okay? A common crime committed here is not exiting the script with a result every time. Why is that wrong? I'm going to actually demo this one because it's kind of hard to explain. So I think it'll be easier to grasp with the demo. And how to prevent this. Always use exit script with a result of null, or you could also use empty quotes. So let's take a look at that one. Whoa. So this is one of the sample files, common crimes, and we're going to do this, the exit script demo. So I'm going to open up my script debugger here, and I have the incorrect way and the correct way. So let's take a look at that incorrect way first. Is that big enough? Get a little bigger. All right, so I have my parent script. That's what I'm in right now, and I'm going to call a subscript. It's called script A. And I'm going to set some text to a variable, and then I'm going to exit with that result. So I'm just exiting with some text saved to a variable. Now I'm performing script B, and I have similar just text saved to a variable, but I'm not exiting with anything, okay? I'm exiting with nothing, or this would work the same way if I don't even use exit script step at all, if the script just ends right there. All right, so now I'm using get script result. So the question in your head should be, will I get text from script A, because that's the last thing that actually gave me anything, or will I get nothing from script B because that's the last script that ran, and when you use get script result, that should give you the very last thing, the result from the very last script you ran. So all of you should have guesses in your heads, and let's take a look if you're right. So look alive, soldiers. It is actually coming from script A. So you're getting the result from script A, even though I ran script B the most recently. So I hope you can kind of see why this is a little bit scary, because let's say I had an error in script A, and then I dealt with it, and then I ran script B, and then I checked for error from that, and it said I have an error, but I really don't, because I didn't actually pass anything. So let's take a look on how to fix that, how to avoid that problem. So let's take a look at the correct way. So similarly, I have a parent script, and this is running script C, and I'm exiting with some result. Everybody drop and give me 20. And then now I'm running script D, and I'm just passing just an empty variable. It has nothing in it. Or even if I just had empty quotes, it would also work the same way. And so now if I do get script result, what do I get? Oh, thank goodness, I got the last thing, the very last thing the last script that I actually ran. So that's what I would really expect. All right, so that's that demo. So the next one I'm going to talk about is my script sometimes runs in the wrong layout. So what's the crime committed here? Poor window management, and I've seen this more times than I'd like to admit. Why is it wrong? I'm going to demo this one as well because I think it'll bring it home. And how are we going to prevent this? Well, if you are jumping from window to window, if you have a multi-window system going on, you want to make sure you select window carefully, close window carefully, and your window variable names. And we will jump into that demo right now. All right, so let's take a look at that. I'm going to go back home, and I'm going to go to the window management. Oh, and I forgot to delete these. Let me delete them really quick. Here we go. And I'll zoom in. All right, so what this does is just going to add an event, and I have this pop over, and I have this event, and I have this list of tasks. Then they're separated by a return character. And so I want my event information to go in this portal, and then I want my task to go in this portal. So let's take a look at the sad face way to do things the wrong way. All right, so first thing you'll notice is that I'm checking for required values, so that's good. Let's make sure we have what we want. And then I'm doing my block of variables. So let's set all of our variables. Now we want to actually create the event. So I'm doing a new window, and I'll open this up a little bit. And new record, set some fields. And you'll notice that I should have probably closed this window because I was done with it, but just for the sake of this demonstration, I didn't. And now I want to create the task. So I'm going to now create a new window for task, and then set some fields, and then do a loop here. And so I'll demo the marker here really quick too. So you can see I have two markers. And what's interesting is if your script step is disabled, your marker is also disabled. So if you have a marker there on a disabled script, it won't actually stop there. So something that I learned while making this demo. So run that, and so you can see it went to here. So it went through that loop and created my tasks for me. And now I finished, and I want to close this popover, but I'm not in the right context. I didn't close this window, and I am not on the correct window. So now that my popover didn't close. So that's not like the best user experience. So just to show you, demonstrate what is probably better is the create with the happy face. So similarly, I am checking for required fields, and now you might notice I have a little bit more variables here. So I put the variable name of my windows here, and the reason I like to do that is because if you have to change the window name for whatever reason, now you can just change it in one spot instead of having to go find everywhere you use it inside the script. So I always like to name my windows up top. And then if I know I'm going to do a multi-window script, I always have the original because I know I'm going to want to come back to that original window. So I want to make sure I can get back there. So we step through here. So let's create this event. Commit the records. So what's going on here? I close the window, hidden event, and now I'm creating the window hidden event. Does that make any sense at all? Well, yes, because what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that that window name is not already in use. So if it is, I want to close it because I'm about to create it. Like let's say you were debugging and then you stop the script and then you have that window open in the background and it could have been like some different context than what you were expecting at this point of your script. So always close your window before you actually create a new window because it'll just prevent you from potentially being in the wrong window at the wrong time. So now I can create a new window and this again will just create a new record and commit that and then close that window when I'm done. And then I'll do the same thing for task. I'll close the window before I open it and now I'll open a new window and again I will just go through here and I will hit the play button so that the loop goes a little bit faster, and now I select my original window. I want to make sure I'm where I started, and now I can close the popover, and now I have a better user experience. All right. All right, so the next common crime, and I think this is our last one, execute SQL doesn't work, okay? So what are some reasons why execute SQL might not work? Well, perhaps you are using some reserved words. So execute SQL does have some reserved words, and if you happen to use that as your field, then it's going to get super confused. So you can just wrap it with quotes, or maybe if you have to change your field name. There are some functions in SQL that are not supported within FileMaker, so we just support a subset. So something to keep in mind. You might need quotes around your field of your table name or your field name if you have a space or if you start with an underscore, or if there's a potential that your field name might have changed and you hard-coded it, then that could also cause your execute SQL to fail. So here's one that my dear friend Anastasia discovered for me. Is you should run a commit before you run the execute SQL. So why is that? If you run execute SQL on uncommitted data, FileMaker crashes. Yeah. And another point to that is if you have data in your data viewer, if you have execute SQL in your data viewer and then you have uncommitted data, FileMaker crashes. So try not to keep execute SQL in your data viewer if you don't really need it. One other thing I wanted to point out, and this is more like a little tip. This really just blew my mind when Decor pointed this out to me, and I was like, my mind was blown. So execute SQL, when you get dates out of execute SQL, it's not FileMaker friendly dates, right? It's not the same format. So this easy little trick will just turn it into a FileMaker date that FileMaker likes. So all you do is substitute the dash for the plus and wrap that around get as date. Why that works, I have no idea, but it works. All right, so now you have your common crimes, you know your tools. What do you do now if you're really stuck, like nothing else has really worked? So you call for backup, right? All right, so there's different ways to call for backup. My favorite way for calling for backup is get a support from a few people you trust. So I have my two backup buddies here, these two wonderful human beings who always say yes when I ask for help. So they're and I usually have to get them a beer at DEF CON, and I still owe you guys a beer. So thank you for being my backup buddies. There's also the FileMaker community. So maybe somebody already had that question, already had that problem. Do a search, and if you can't find it, the community is really awesome at responding and helping people out. So there's people in the community who would love to help. Obviously, you could do a Google search. There may be a blog post or a video on the subject. So always good to check Dr. Google. And also, if you're part of Women Innovating Together, we have a Slack group that we offer technical help on. So that's another channel as well. And I just want to say congratulations to you all. You have all graduated from boot camp. You are amazing. Yes. This session will have updates, and please don't forget to fill out your evaluation, so hopefully they let me come back. Thank you so much.